Coming up, the UK is in the midst of a cost of living crisis, with post-Brexit labour shortages damaging the economy, our NHS facing an existential crisis, record homelessness, a distribution of wealth that now makes us the most unequal society in Europe. Billions of pounds fraudulently diverted from the public purse into Tory cronies' pockets during the pandemic and still remaining unaccounted for. And last but not least, the climate emergency. In this context, Rishi Sunak called a press conference this week. His priority, that he claims is also the priority of the British people? Stop the boats. I say it's not a priority, and that's not an opinion, it's counting. Around 20,000 people seeking asylum have crossed the Channel this year, compared to an estimated 1.2 million people coming to the country legally. Even if Sunak stopped the boats tomorrow, he'd cut overall immigration by only 1.6%. Yet it became possible this week that should he fail to implement this headline-grabbing gimmick of a policy, this utterly bonkers multi-million-pound plan of performative cruelty, his MPs will trigger a vote of no confidence, meaning yet another Tory leadership crisis.
You're joking. Not another one?
Stay tuned. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe, and above all, share a link to this video with your social media contacts. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced his new Rwanda migrant bill this week and promptly lost his immigration minister, Robert Gimmick, in the process. Honest Bob Gimmick is mostly famous for assisting his chum, the pornography magnate and Tory donor Richard Desmond, to avoid paying £45 million in taxes on his investment on a new housing development. Other than that, Gimmick had been known as a staunch ally of whoever's in charge and as someone who always follows the party line. Indeed, his cabinet colleagues used to call him Robert Generic, but no more. Sunak's closest allies have been giving quotes to the media this week like, "Hell hath no fury like a man passed over for Home Secretary twice." It's just treacherous. They're trying to destroy the party. And yet another Tory MP telling Politico, Gimmick's resignation is off the scale in terms of its significance. Yet Gimmick and Sunak are united in their belief that the illegal, internationally mocked and ludicrous Rwanda Plan to send just 100 migrants to Rwanda at a cost of up to £3 million per head and rising isn't, to quote James cleverly, batshit crazy. They're not arguing about the merits of the bonkers scheme itself, they're arguing in effect about what colour to paint its toenails. But as a result, Sunaks team are now desperately scrambling around, trying to shore up support amongst the parliamentary party, with a Commons vote due this week. Aubrey Allegretti, chief political correspondent for The Times, said on X, "A Tory MP's snap assessment. I really think it's over and the party will just implode. It's going to be a long slog until the next election." As I record this video, it's not at all clear that Sunak will be able to secure the support of enough of his MPs to get the legislation passed. There's a bunch of backbenchers from the Common Sense Group, the European Research Group, the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, and the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea, for all I know, that are thinking about how to react to Honest Bob's thunderbolt resignation. The swivel-eyed loom wing of the party are taking legal advice on the bill before deciding whether to back it or move against it. And the slightly less extreme One Nation group of Tory MPs have also employed a lawyer to examine the legislation. This could mean either or both of these factions voting against the government. And this is where it gets really interesting. At Sunak's hastily arranged news conference this week, he insisted a Commons vote on the bill would not be a matter of confidence in his government. I think that's because Sunak realises there is a very real possibility that his government could lose this vote. Not certain, but possible. When asked if Tory MPs who defied him would be thrown out of the party, Mr Sunak meekly replied, no. This is the opposite of strong leadership, and the lack of willingness to attempt to apply party discipline must surely be because if it was made a confidence issue and the MPs were whipped to vote with the government and then the government did lose the vote, Sunak would then have only 14 days to try and win back the support of the Commons, and if he couldn't do that, then a general election would have to be called. Despite their massive theoretical majority in the Commons, the Tories look to be in serious trouble, with a massive rift opening up between the One Nation Tories and their more extreme colleagues in those weird little echo chambers on the right of the party. The rift was made worse, of course, by Sunak's recent sacking of the most dangerous extremist in Britain, Suella Braverman, and the simultaneous appointment of the supposedly centrist, dodgy Dave Cameron. This recent cabinet reshuffle polarised the party even more, which means that Honest Bob's surprise resignation comes at a particularly dangerous time for Sunak, with speculation that Braverman, and even Gimmick himself, are among those positioning themselves for a leadership challenge in the near future. Only Graham Brady, chair of the 1922 committee, knows for sure how many letters of no confidence he's received from Tory MPs, but there was wide media speculation that even before Gimmick's resignation, the figure could have been as much as halfway towards the 54 required to trigger a confidence vote in Sunak. Even the Mail's Tory-loving political editor Jason Groves admits that Mr. Gimmick's departure might trigger further resignations or add to the pile of letters of no confidence, which is already said to be in double figures. Lots of MPs are concerned about their seats and the polls, and they're rapidly forming the view the current management is not performing and will not deliver an election win. And The Times quotes a senior government source telling them that the incentives are beginning to tip away from staying in government to positioning yourself for a future after it. The next Tory leader will be elected by the Tory membership, who are much further to the right than the parliamentary party is. And hence, Gimmick's resignation is almost undoubtedly a decision he's made to burnish his right-wing credentials and enhance his chances of winning a leadership contest. Completely delusional given he's about 4 supporters in Parliament, but his resignation could be the catalyst that leads to other far-right Tory MPs thinking the same way and going in hard in their criticism of the bill. Altogether, this poses a real threat to Sunak that there may be the numbers to block his Rwanda legislation in the Commons. But even if the new laws do win a majority in the Commons, the real test still lies ahead. The bill will undoubtedly face resistance in the House of Lords, where a majority of peers on all sides of the chamber still respect international law and treat the Human Rights Act as sacrosanct. That means that the upper chamber is very likely to send the bill back to the Commons several times, delaying the legislation by months, during which time frustration within the Tory party will only increase. And assuming Sunak does survive the next week in Parliament, the pressure on him is only going to increase. And we're sure to see our pampered oligarch Prime Minister get increasingly tetchy in return, in an ever-increasing death spiral of populist rhetoric, threats and insults. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's perfectly possible that the legislation won't even reach the Lords. The Times are now reporting that, according to one senior Tory MP, the danger is we get a confidence vote by accident, because if one MP says, "I'm putting my letter in," others do too. The MP added, "I just want Sunak to do better and listen to us. I actually want him to win the next general election, but frankly, to please both wings of the party on an issue like this is impossible, and that's where leadership is important." There seems to be quite a few senior Tories who do now think a confidence vote is possible, although none of them seriously believe that Sunak would lose it. That's hardly the point though. Theresa May and Boris Johnson both won no confidence votes, but the significant numbers voting against them proved within a few months to be a fatal wound. Will Gimmick's resignation turn out to have been a spark that lights a fire of revolt on the Tory right that will bring down Sunak? Gimmick had become known as the Tories' in-house expert on immigration, but he left because, in his opinion, the new Rwanda Plan is completely hopeless, labelling it a triumph of hope over experience. Frankly, it's not the actual plan that's the problem. It's the completely ludicrous idea of paying £3 million per head for just 100 out of the many, many thousands of asylum seekers to be shipped off to an African country with a dodgy human rights record in the hope that it's going to prove to be some kind of deterrent to other desperate human beings already ignoring the greater deterrent of drowning in the English Channel. The government themselves caused the small boat crossings by closing down all legal routes of entry bar from Hong Kong and Ukraine, and also by leaving the European Union and at the same time the Dublin Convention, which used to allow asylum seekers to be returned to the first safe member country of entry. The government caused the small boats issue, and the government could solve it if they wished. Their Rwanda Plan is a plan to deal with asylum seekers only after they've already reached the UK. The government know who the people trafficking gangs are, and they know that they're based on British soil. Also, France has offered to establish refugee processing centres on French soil, plans that our government have rejected. Why? Well, partly because the Rwanda scheme creates lucrative contracts for Tory cronies and donors, but equally because politicising the small boat crossings and the desperately cruel Tory Rwanda Plan appears to be Sunak's only hope for shifting the polls back towards the Tories. I think he's deluded in this belief, even should a plane to Rwanda eventually take off. Tory voters and the blue wall seats in the southeast of England mainly oppose this policy, which is pushing them into the arms of the Lib Dems. The thin-skinned, petulant Sunak was asked at his impromptu press conference this week if he was telling MPs, back me or sack me. He responded with his usual tetchiness, trying to shift this Tory-created problem onto the opposition. The real question is for the Labour Party, he said. Not really. Labour has already pledged to scrap the Rwanda policy if it wins the next election. And that'll give them another 300 million quid to spend on real priorities. Do you think we'll see the oligarch green card holder Rishi Sunak emigrate to America before any asylum seeker is forced to emigrate to Rwanda? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.